Bruins Beat.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat. I am Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great, Connor. And I got to say, before we start, it's a great time to remind people of all our great content over on the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, which you might be watching right now, or you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Bruins Ringside on YouTube. Bruins Beat twice a week. Poke the Bear twice a week. Pucks with Haggs twice a week. Occasionally Bear with me with Joey Capone. So you got a lot of different kinds of content. We do live streams. A week ago Monday, it was a devastating night when the Bruins fell from potentially the 5th pick to number 7. But we were live for it, breaking it down and all that. So it's all over Bruins Ringside on YouTube. Or if you're not a big YouTube person, you got Apple Podcasts, you got Spotify. There are other podcasts. I know Amazon Prime, I think, has some podcasting stuff. So there's lots of places to get our work. And make sure you go do that and subscribe. And if you really want to know when things drop, turn the notifications on. Turn the notifications on, and that can help you out quite a bit. Connor, how was your weekend?
Pretty good, Evan. Not too bad. I made the call to go golfing with my buddies on Saturday. First time this spring being like, hey, the stars aligned. Everyone's free. We went up to the tree house in Tewksbury, which is a really, really neat spot. It's a 9-hole, but they completely kind of refurbished the grounds. The brewery itself is sick. Great time to do it. And then it became Dagobah. The entire Friday through Saturday was like Yoda's abode, man. It was just raining and miserable all the time. It was beautiful on Sunday, of course, afterwards. But
of course, all
things considered, though, it was still we still got the round in. There was no one in front of us, behind us, because it was raining the entire time. But it's good. It was just like you envision you're in Ireland, right? That's what you got to do. Don't imagine you're in Tewksbury. Just imagine you're in Tipperary, and it kind of you feel like you're in that setting you want to be in. So all things considered, it was pretty good. How about yourself?
It was good. I haven't been on the golf course yet this year, and it is getting to mid-May, and we are approaching summer fast. And it's like I don't want summer to hit, and I'm still going to be shanking balls left and right into the woods, but I'd like to be a little bit better than my worst. But it was actually a hockey-filled weekend. Mass Festival was at New England Sports Center this past weekend for the boys. 08s, 09s, and 10s, which people are like, oh my God, they're in high school now. And the answer is yes, which is mind-blowing. You know who was there? Was Jim Montgomery. Jim Montgomery's son is an 09, still playing in the area. So Monty was there, said hello. That was it. I don't feel like, what happened with you and the Bruins?
He's not listening to our podcast, hopefully.
You believe it? It's like Saturday at like 8:30 in the morning. And I'm like, so what happened in Boston? And he's like, please leave me alone.
Yes.
But it was good weekend.
We're not talking about the 6-on-5. We're not talking about the Bruins.
No, I didn't bring that up to him. I made sure not to bring up the 6-on-5. That's a no. That's a big no-go. But it was a good weekend of hockey. A lot of good guys coming down the pipeline from Mass. So for local hockey fans, it should be a good batch coming up. And then Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Love you, Mom. Listens to every episode. Doesn't miss one. Connor, I met your mom at your wedding. She was awesome.
Shout out Kathy. Shout out Kathy Ryan.
Kathy Ryan and Mary Marinofsky. So hopefully everybody had a good Mother's Day on Sunday. Connor, you published a story over the weekend on 8 under the radar Bruins coaches who could potentially be in the running. And this comes on the heels of some reports at the end of last week. David Pagnotta reported that Marco Sturm is in the mix. I think it was Frank Saravalli reported that the Bruins could be interested or are interested in Rick Tocchet, which is another, that's sort of more of a retread, but a hot coaching candidate for sure. Currently doing the TNT broadcast. I love how he just jump right back into that. I always wonder if I imagine coaches enjoy doing that and former players enjoy doing that. It's definitely a little less stress, a little more loose, fun, especially that TNT show. Sort of like a throne to Brad Marchand this past weekend. But in terms of, the 8 that you listed, you start with Misha Donskov, which I think we've talked about quite a bit. Mitch Love with the Caps. Then you get into Marco Sturm. So let's start with Sturm. Sturm's an interesting one because he played here. He doesn't have a ton of coaching experience, but he has been a head coach for the last 3 years in the AHL. And he was an assistant at the NHL level. So he does check those boxes. Where are you at on Marco Sturm?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely an intriguing candidate. You've got the clear connections with the fact that he was a former player, but he's also kind of carved his own path to be where he is right now, right? Primarily on the West Coast. As you said, has experience in the NHL coaching ranks as an assistant. He's been down in the AHL, so he knows kind of how to run the show there. He's helped develop some guys that are making an impact at the NHL level, like Byfield, Brant Clark, a few of those other guys that the Kings have. So it's encouraging there that beyond the fact that it seems like he's been able to run a pretty successful team over in Ontario, Canada, not Canada, California, by
California,
the way.
yes.
Because I was going to say, a lot of people are probably very confused as to why you would think they'd have a team up in Ontario, up in Canada if they're an LA team. But no.
Remember the Worcester Sharks? Remember the Worcester Sharks?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I think a lot of teams have now gotten a little bit better in terms of we should probably have our AHL team just a little bit closer. You got teams like Vegas's teams in like Henderson, which is like the town next over in Vegas. So it's a lot easier that way.
Practice. Court Lalonde was telling me, and I might be wrong. I think they practice in the same arena.
That might be true. I think it's a big ice complex over there. So it's like Henderson's literally like the next town over. It's like Boston and Cambridge. But so yeah, I think it's a lot easier now in terms of they're putting these AHL teams a little bit closer. But no, like Sturm has that experience. He obviously, I think his stock really kind of rose during the 2018 Olympics, where without any NHL players, Team Germany went on a bit of a surprise run there, their best finish ever in the Olympics. So he's kind of put on the national radar there. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like about Sturm and what he could provide. Like I think he's got the clear Bruins connections, and he's got a pretty good resume. Like what are his principles or his strengths or something like that? Not really sure. Like I'd have to do a little bit more of a deeper dive, but in terms of like under the radar, giving that role to someone who's not been an NHL head coach, like Sturm has built a pretty good resume for himself that it's beyond the fact that he's just a former Bruin. I think he is a guy that is definitely an intriguing candidate for the Bruins moving forward.
I think that's the biggest thing. And he's younger. He's only 46.
46, yeah.
According to Elite Prospects. So like young guy, coached the Germany U20 team for a long time in the 2010s. And as you said, an assistant coach with the Kings and now the head coach of Ontario, the Ontario Reign. And I think it's interesting because one piece of feedback I've heard about Donskov is, well, he's never been a head coach. And that's a legitimate criticism. Like that's a legitimate, and people say, well, he needs to be a head coach then. Well, yeah. And I think a lot of people would say, well, then go be a head coach in the AHL, where you can gain that experience and understand how to sort of run a ship, because it is different. I mean, and there have been countless head coaches in the past who are assistant coaches who were phenomenal assistants who just weren't head coaches. And I'm not saying Misha Donskov isn't. I really like Donskov.
Josh McDaniels.
Josh McDaniels is a great one. Another great one is Dave Lewis. Remember, Dave Lewis was an assistant with all those Detroit Red Wings teams, and then the Bruins bring him on as a head coach, if memory serves, and it did not work out. One really bad season, and that wasn't it. So there are lots of good assistants around the NHL who just are not head coaches, and there's different dynamics as head coach. Got to be a little tougher. It's you're not as buddy with players, and depending on how you kind of view relationships. So Sturm checks that box. He's been a head coach for 3 years now. And as you mentioned, he's developed some good players. The Kings have a good young team. I know they can't seem to get past the Oilers, but Sturm has still helped develop a lot of those guys. And there's the other part of it, and it's sort of cliche among all the 4 sports teams here, Connor, but I do think there is value to having played here. It's a different animal here. Boston's a different market. Fans care a lot more than other markets. They're more into it. Sturm was here during that. And Sturm, well, he wasn't here in 2011 when they won the Cup, got here and was in those early days of the team that sort of became the team that won a lot over the last 15 years, 06, 07, 07, 08, 08, 09, 09, 10. And he was a big part of those teams, a really big part. And again, I'm not saying I'm picking him as head coach because of that, but I do think it helps that a guy like Sturm was here through a lot of that and kind of understands the pressure that comes with this market.
Yeah, it is different from here as opposed to, it's somewhere like here, somewhere that's original 6 franchise, a Canadian market, a little bit more pressure than some of these other places. So I do think that does factor into it. And again, to your point, just the experience, right? Whether it's knowing the expectations in a city, in a market like Boston, or just the expectations of being a head coach, right? And I do think that is the one thing with Donskov. I really like Donskov. I think he checks off a lot of boxes. I like that. I think you can see what his strengths already are, right? In terms of like scouting, evaluating players, figuring out how to best maximize a player's development or their best path forward. What to like about it, but still there is that question as to your point of like Dave Lewis or someone like that is a valid concern or something you just have to account for. You can look at someone and be like, hey, he's ready for his opportunity, and we think he's going to roll with it, and he's going to be great. He's going to step into that role and expand upon his strengths. But you have to also view the contingency plan or what could go wrong, which is it's too much for him. Maybe he is just better suited to you master your craft at, pre-scout, video, developing all those things. That's your wheelhouse. If you put on too much on their plate, maybe you lessen what their impact could be. So, yeah, like as much as, if you ask me which of these like under the radar candidates I like the most, it is Donskov, because I think you could really like the ceiling and you like his expertise and what he's done. He's had success everywhere he's gone, but the experience is something that has to factor into it. Like you are still inviting some risk. And if you're the Bruins front office, and we've said like you can flip it the other way where this is probably the last coaching hire they're going to make, most likely, unless it's someone who's going to be here for 5-10 years, that you reset the cycle that way. But if it's someone you're going to hire and it's a disaster, that you're probably not getting another opportunity again.
No.
So it's, do you weigh, the up and coming unproven guy like Donskov? Do you, again, go off the board still, but maybe with someone like Mitch Love or Sturm who have coaching experience? Or do you also just go for the retread, which again, you probably have the best bet in terms of getting a little bit of a bump next year, but how high does your ceiling go? So much is going to ride on this coach in terms of how the front office is viewing this upcoming season, what they're prioritizing, and most importantly for their own respective jobs. Like, is this going to be a sustainable window you're trying to open up here with your coach, and who's going to be the right guy to set the tone moving forward?
To me, this is the biggest thing. Don Sweeney, as of now, is a lame duck GM. He's going into the last year of his deal. We don't know his future beyond this upcoming year. Doesn't mean he's not coming back. But again, Cam Neely didn't give him a huge vote of confidence at the end of season presser. And we don't know we don't know his future is past this season. And granted, everything Sweeney said at that end of season presser leads me to believe that they are going to go down the road of finding a coach like a Marco Sturm, like a Misha Donskov. It's going to be that kind, someone who's might be their first opportunity head coaching in the NHL, someone young, a little bit more innovative, outside the box type candidate. And I'm for that. I'm absolutely for that. I think you and I have been for that since mid-season. But there is that part where it's like Sweeney is kind of GMing for his job. And the reality is a Rick Tocchet or a Peter Laviolette or a Gerard Gallant is a much safer option. You know what you're getting. Lower ceiling, much higher floor. And I agree with you. I think those guys could be out in 2 or 3 years and, burn out the locker room and everything. It could absolutely happen. But you are taking a huge chance. I mean, we talk about Dave Lewis, or like, just Misha Donskov not being a great head coach. If that's the case, well, then Sweeney's probably screwed. Mm-hmm. And that front office is hurt by that. And if you're 2 years from now looking for another head coach because you hired someone without experience, and now you're reaching into the retread pool and trying to find someone who has a lot of that head coaching experience, I don't think Sweeney's going to be the one doing that because he's probably going to be gone. So I think Sweeney's saying all the right things in that of who they're trying to go for. And certainly him saying that they're still in the playoffs makes me think of Mitch Love and Misha Donskov. And I like that. I like going that direction. But there is that part of it where it is a safer option to, like, for instance, Rick Tocchet. Rick Tocchet's a safer option. And he doesn't feel as much like a retread to me, even though he has coached in quite a few places and been around for quite a long time. Maybe it's because he, had a good run in Vancouver up until this past year, and it was literally just like a 2-year run. And again, Tocchett's win-loss record historically really has only been good in Vancouver for those 2 years prior to this year.
Arizona, right? So,
and then I think he was with Florida, or was it Tampa for a little bit?
I think Florida, but I'm not entirely sure.
And that was short. But so again, like, I'm more for the Mitch Love, Misha Donskov, but I do think Sweeney's future does play a big part in whoever they hire as head coach.
Yeah, and it all comes down to just, you're going to be inviting risk in either way, right? Like maybe you
Yes.
hire Talkett or maybe you hire Laviolette as someone and you get a 1-year bump and he gets a contract. Well, if the same trajectory follows with like Laviolette or like Gerard Gallant, where you get a 1-year bump, feel like things are on the right track, and then shit implodes in the second year and guys are miserable and you make some playoffs again and your growth is stagnant, does that change the Bruins perception? Like even if Sweeney gets a new contract and they suck 2 years from now and all the progress made is somewhat stunted, right? Does that give him a vote of confidence? Like I feel like he'd be just at risk if you're not. If right now, if you're the Bruins and you're trying to build a sustainable winning core for the long haul, what's that look like in 2027? If we're in an offseason, the Bruins missed the playoffs after making it the year before, and guys have regressed, and all of a sudden you feel like you're back at square one. I'd rather you go with a younger coach that, there's risk of like what Donskov could do, what a guy like Love could do, or anything like that. But I still think your ceiling is higher. You're also giving yourself more opportunities to build something for the long haul than the immediate returns. But again, I'm not also the GM that's got a 1 year left on his contract and is trying to, make the right moves. Like I also don't expect the Bruins to, just roll with the punches. If all of a sudden they're fishing for Gavin McKenna next year, that's still not acceptable. It means that John Sweeney's probably not making that pick, right? Like, no. You can pitch someone of like, hey, if you're trying to build a sustainable team for the future, getting Gavin McKenna or Ivar Stenberg or one of these other guys would help you out a whole lot too. But I don't think the Bruins or their front office wants to go through another full year of what we saw last year. We did that for what, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and it sucked. Imagine doing a full year of that.
Nope.
So there is no like rhyme or reason, right? There's plenty of pros and cons. So however you want to map out who they're going to hire, what they're envisioning for next year and the years ahead of that. But I just think if you're the Bruins, I'd rather you roll the dice on someone that's younger with a higher ceiling than the potential to make the playoffs, get bounced in the first round next year, and all of a sudden you're just waiting for kind of like that other shoe to drop, right? I just think there's more upside with a Sturm or a Love or a Donskov. And I feel like this podcast, we're like putting up maybe not the red flags, but just the other side, because I feel like everyone is now on the Donskov hype train.
Yes.
But it is just something you need to consider. Like, hell,
you got to cool it a little bit.
This could be his opportunity and he rolls with it, but you do have to, especially if you're the Bruins and you're making this calculated risk, you do have to factor that in.
I think that's the biggest thing. And again, if they do hire Donskov and he becomes, the next Bruce Cassidy or the next Spencer Carberry, everybody's gonna be like, oh, you guys were against Donskov. It's like, no, we were the ones shouting the name. But it's like, we do have to say, like, look, he hasn't been a head coach anywhere. Like, anywhere. And I do think that is important that you have that experience. And I'm fine with them hiring him. I like Donskov a lot. Everything I've read, everything I've heard has been really good. But that is a red flag. And that's something that they are definitely going through right now in the front office. Another thing the front office should be doing is subscribing to Bruins Ringside, Connor. That's what they should be doing right now. And I would also recommend it to all of you. Bruins Ringside on YouTube. A lot of stuff going on. Even in the offseason, we've talked about it. The offseason is going to be really exciting. We had the draft lottery last week. Our head coaching candidates, which we're going through right now. We've got, free agency coming up, the draft, trades. It'll be a seismic offseason. So make sure to subscribe to us at Bruins Ringside. Bruins Beat, Poke the Bear, Pucks with Haggs. And then also, if you like to listen to us in the car and you don't want to use data, make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to go do that over there. See, I think with Savard, I just don't think he has the experience. Player development-wise, I like him. Power play-wise, I like him. I'm not there yet on him as a head coach yet. I think you got to be in a spot for longer than a year or two. Get some head coaching experience, maybe in the AHL as well. Again, with Donskov, he doesn't have the head coaching experience at the pro ranks, but he has been in the pro ranks for a long time, going on 20 years. So Savard, I know he's a fan favorite. You can get so much out of him throwing his stick into the stands in 2010 and all that. But Savard, I'm just not quite there yet on.
Yeah, I feel like Savard is someone that I think if you were to add him to the team, I'd rather have him as like an assistant just to be the power play like guru. And I don't think that's going to now be the case. Now, I feel like, I'm not sure how coveted he's going to be as like a head coaching candidate during this cycle, but I also feel like he's in a pretty good spot with Toronto, with Craig Berube, who he's worked with. I think he technically played together, I think, at the very end of Berube's career. So they had that connection. He knew him from St. Louis. Obviously, he was coaching there beforehand. So I think Savard's in a good spot to, as you said, you stay there for a couple of years, continue to build up your resume, continue to build up hype. He's going to be with a very good Toronto team for a while here, especially in terms of offensive players. That power play is going to be
no Mitch Marner, though. Mitch Marner, if he comes here,
that is true. That's going to hurt it a little bit, but the power is going to be a top 10 unit, you would imagine, for most of his stretch there for however long he's going to be. So, yeah, like I'm not going to, again, put up the same exact roadblocks of like the experience is the main reason why. It just does feel like he needs to build a little bit more of a resume in terms of what his strengths are and stuff like that. It's almost like, with Donskov, he's done a little bit of everything, right? He's got top achievements in terms of stuff with Hockey Canada with Four Nations. He's known as being kind of like a expert in pre-scouting and just regular scouting, player development, those kinds of things. Whereas I feel like Savard's one thing is the power play, which is a key part of it. But I feel like until he starts building out the rest of his strengths or best of his capabilities as a coach, that's maybe a few years down the road, he can kind of step into a head coaching role. So if he wanted to come to the Bruins to fix their power play, I'd be all for it. I think that's a guy that the skill set, the track record is there. But I don't know if right now is the time to make him a head coach.
It's like how with the Red Sox, they're always like, Jason Varitek needs to be the next head coach. And it's like, I don't know. Does he really have to be?
Yeah.
I don't think he's quite there yet. So I feel the same way about Savard. Be a fun story, but I don't know if that would be the right move long term, at least right now. Doesn't mean he's not going to be a great head coach someday. I think he easily could be, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Some other interesting names. We've kind of touched on him a little bit, but Mitch Love. Mitch Love has, been a good assistant with Washington, but I think the biggest thing, he won the AHL Coach of the Year award 2 years in a row with the Stockton Heat and the Calgary Wranglers. So again, he, again, has proven to be a very good head coach down there. I think that's a good thing. Any big thoughts on Mitch Love?
Yeah, I actually really like Mitch Love. Again, it's kind of the same thing with Sturm. I need to dive a little bit more into like the hallmarks of his coaching. Like what, there's some guys where like when Bruce Cassidy first became head coach here, you saw immediately like the type of team he wanted to build. But you look at like he primarily handles Washington's defense in the last 2 years under Carberry with the Capitals, and Washington's kind of like Carolina's D though, where they're very active, they're very aggressive, they fire in shots from the blue line, they activate, which is not really what Mitch Love was as a player. He was primarily kind of an AHL journeyman, but kind of a grinder. He was like one of those good guys where he played like left wing and D. So, he just was running over guys. I think.
Oh yeah.
I saw his stats. I think he has like 888 penalty minutes in like 200 AHL games or something like that.
Yep. I was just reading it in your story.
So he's been around the block, but really young. He just turned 40, I want to say, or maybe he's going to turn 41 pretty soon. So a younger coach, but to your point, like is a fresh voice. Has had a lot of success, as you said. I think just the third AHL coach to win back-to-back Coach of the Years. So he has that experience like Sturm with really good results. And he's with Washington, and all of a sudden their D looks pretty legit the last 2 years with him. You look at like even like Rasmus Sandin and how he's kind of hit a new gear. Look at Jacob Chychrun. Yep. Yeah, the bounce back he's had. So he's a guy that, Donskov gets a lot of hype behind him. I almost kind of put like Donskov, Sturm, and Love in that one tier. And like, you can make a pretty compelling argument.
Hagens, Frindell, and Denoyer.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you can make a pretty compelling argument that a guy like Love, who is still in the playoffs, to what Don Sweeney said, would not be surprised if he's a legitimate candidate. He's a guy that, again, the track record or the resume maybe isn't as large as some other people, but like, look at the success along the way, right? I think that's something that wherever he's gone, there's been a lot of success. And I think it's the same way with a guy like Donskov. Like wherever they go, you see the results. They're pretty evident. And whatever he's doing, it's clearly working. So I think that's the guy that people should definitely keep tabs on as a younger coach that can build with this team, get results, fix up the D, which is something that was a big issue. He's helped a lot of younger guys develop, which has to be a key core principle of what this team needs to do moving forward. So I really like Mitch Love. And I was kind of worried at first. I wasn't paying attention when I put his name in. I wrote Mike Love. And I was like, I really hope they don't hire the Beach Boys to do that, because if you Google Mike Love, sure ain't a guy in a rink. He's in a pineapple shirt.
Yes.
75 years old singing somewhere. So
Wish they all could be California girls.
Yeah, he was out at the Kokomo. So, but no,
That's
Mitch
right.
Love, not
Different
Mike Love,
person.
Mitch Love.
Mitch Love.
I think he's a really, really intriguing candidate.
And another one that I like that you listed, and I haven't thought much about him, but just from reading in your story about him, Todd Nelson. So Todd Nelson's 55, so older than sort of the Sturm and some of the guys we've talked about. But he won the Calder Cup with the Grand Rapids Griffins in 16-17, and then won back-to-back Calder Cups with Hershey in the AHL. That's the Capitals affiliate. Now, they have produced some great players in recent seasons. That team the Hershey Bears have been notoriously really good. They've been producing guys. I do wonder if a guy like Nelson gets a look he does have that player development track record. He does have the success in the AHL. And this is someone that has been a successful head coach somewhere in professional hockey. I do think he would make a lot of sense, at least to talk to and seriously consider.
Yeah, another guy where you just look at the track record, it's tough to ignore, especially like some of these coaches. And again, it's maybe more of a byproduct of the Calder Cup playoff format where you're going to have a great record and then you get bounced in the first round. It's a best of three. Like the fact that Nelson with Hershey, especially the last couple of years, has built like a wagon of a team with like a blend of veteran guys in the AHL, but also younger players that they've developed along the way. You look at like McMichael, Hendrix Lapierre, Alexei Protas. Like there's been a whole bunch of guys that have really carved out a great spot in the NHL off of, playing featured top minutes down in Hershey under Todd Nelson's tutelage. So I think that's a guy that, as you said, a little bit older, has experience, was a head coach briefly in that awful Oilers 14-15 season. So, but again, that was 10 years ago. Like you'd think that there'd be probably another opportunity between then. I want to say he was Detroit's coaching staff. He had some experience before Dallas. Yeah. So he was with Grand Rapids, won a Calder Cup, was on coaching staffs up in the NHL, then went back to Hershey. So he's been around the block, right? And he's still a guy that, even though he's been a hockey lifer, he's been kind of all over the place, hasn't had that opportunity yet to step back into an NHL role. So if you told me that Nelson's the guy, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people who are like, who? And then you look at the track record, and he has a very compelling argument for himself. So I don't think that's a stretch or a outlier or anything at all. Like you see what he's done wherever he goes. There's younger players that develop, and you're getting results, which if you're the Bruins, that's who you should be looking at.
And he's done his time. I mean, I'm looking at his EP's team staff profile. 0203 was his first coaching gig, and it was an AHL assistant for Grand Rapids. Like, this is a guy who's been around. Yeah. And, you look at, spent time in the UHL with Muskegon, and then, he bounced around the AHL. He's an NHL assistant with the Thrashers for 2 years, and he's the head coach in Oklahoma City for the AHL for like 4 or 5 years. Then he's Grand Rapids Griffins, and then he's on the Dallas Stars coaching staff, and now he's been the head coach in Hershey. So, like, that is a guy who's due for an NHL head coaching chance. Now, do the Bruins want to be the team that gives him that chance? Looking at his track record, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I mean, this is why, like, when I look at, Mitch Love, Misha Donskov, Marco Sturm, throw Todd Nelson in, like, I think they all kind of are in that same grouping. Nelson's older than them by about, 10 to 15 years. But I do think that they, I think when you're looking at who the next head coach is, I think the average fan, would know a Peter Laviolette more than they would know a Todd Nelson. But I think you might get more out of Nelson, and a potential out of a Nelson or a Love is just so much greater, I think, than that of a Laviolette or a Tortorella or even a Tocchet, I think. And I think that's the route the Bruins are going to go in, and I think it's the route that they should go in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just think that if you're the Bruins and you're looking for higher upside, and especially where I think you look at, the amount of younger players that are on this team right now, right? Between like the Mintons, the Husnadinovs, the Patras, the Lorais, right? Like you've got younger guys that need to develop and take steps forward right now, not to even, discount whoever your number 7 overall pick's going to be or your second rounders. Like if this team really is going to be successful, yeah, you've got the Pasternaks, the McAvoys, the Swaymans, these guys, and you imagine they're going to add to that core in free agency or via trade this year and the years ahead. But for this team to really be successful, you need to bring in younger, affordable, cost-controlled younger players to supplement that core both next year and especially the years ahead. So I think developing these younger players, giving them the rope and the opportunity to try, fail and develop at this level is going to be key. And I think that has to be one of the hallmarks and principles of whoever they hire. And I think whether it is a guy like Donskov with his scouting acumen, whether it's Nelson, what he's done in the AHL, what Mitch Love has done. I almost said Mike. Mitch Love has done in the
not going to be able to unhear that.
Yeah. All these guys, Sturm with Ontario. I think that has to be maybe not the most important thing, but it has to be a core principle of, why they're in this spot, why they're being considered by the Bruins, why they're viewed as, the next up and coming head coach. I think that has to be something that's really key for the Bruins in terms of what they need from their head coach to really be successful in the years ahead. Anyone can put in the right system, fix the power play, or not anyone, but that is going to be a given, right? But you need the coach that's going to get more out of that next wave of talent to help out the star players you already have on the roster.
I look at Lowry and Patra as two big ones because they're guys that you do need to make NHL contributions next year. Patra spent a lot of time in the AHL this year, seemed to grow a lot of confidence. What is he? Is he going to be a center for you in the top six? Is he going to be on the wing and just developing his game? And then I look at Lowry. Like if there's a coach who could get Lowry to be responsible enough in his own zone because his gaps are off and it's just, he looked like a fish out of water sometimes in his own zone this season. But like you look at the offensive upside and what he can do with a puck. And it's like, if you can find a player development guy as your next head coach, I'm not saying just to fix Lowry, but like, I wouldn't be shocked if in these interviews, Lowry is a topic of what do you see with this guy? What's fixable? How would you work with a guy like Lowry to bring out the best in him defensively? I do think that's a legitimate question they're probably asking in these interviews.
Yeah, like look at what Mitch Love is doing with all the guys in Washington. Even like John Carlson's is an all-time player, right? And he feels like he's had a little bit of a resurgence. All their guys on defense have seemed like they've kind of hit their stride, found out what they need to do. And if you're able to bring in a guy like that and it gets Lowry into being not just an offensive threat, but just a capable 19, 20-minute steady defenseman at 23 years old. And that is a building block for the future, right? For now and in the years ahead. So I think that absolutely has to play into it. And to your point, how much of a lift, you're already expecting, Pasternak's going to be Pasternak. You're getting the lift from McAvoy and Lindholm being back. You hope that Swayman bounces back, which is probably the biggest key, but how much of a lift if all of a sudden Fraser Mitten pops or Mason Lowry becomes an everyday player? Those things would be so huge for this team in terms of just having that next wave of guys pull on the rope and help you out moving forward.
Completely. Before we go, I want to remind you guys, make sure to subscribe to Bruins Rinkside on YouTube. Lots of great content coming in the coming weeks, months, maybe years. About 6 episodes a week. Podcast wise, all over 30 minutes. So you're getting a lot of Bruins content, live streams when there's big events happening, big things, a trade, the draft. Whenever they hire a head coach, there'll probably be a live stream to talk about that. So lots of good content coming up. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, as well as, again, if you're more of an audio person, go subscribe to Bruins Beat, Poke the Bear, Pucks with Haggs, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, you can read me over at the Globe and Boston.com. We're going to have you covered every step of the way this Bruins offseason, whether it's the coaching search, free agency, trades, all that stuff. You can read all of it over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.